and we are very, very excited to support the administration's goals of electrifying rapidly. And this charging that you see behind me, this is fast charging. A car plugged in here gets about 150 miles of range in about 15 minutes. Many of the other chargers you can see on the sides of roads, they're level 2. It takes about 6 hours to get the same amount of power as you get in about 15 minutes here. This is really important for the 30% of Americans who don't have access to home charging, for the rideshare drivers and taxi drivers that are electrifying who need to charge quickly, and for the rising number of fleets in America that are electrifying. All of this fast charging in the ecosystem is really, really important. What we're also really proud of at EVGo is that we're contributing to the growth of the economy. We did some internal calculations, and the construction of a fast charger like this creates about 1 job. So if we're talking about another 50,000 fast chargers over the next few years, that's 50,000 American jobs that can't be offshored. So I'm really, really excited, again, to be here, to be with such luminaries, Secretary Pete Buttigieg and my old friend Gina McCarthy, and I would love to now turn the podium over to Secretary Buttigieg.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Happy Earth Day. It is especially fitting for us to be celebrating this here at Union Station, which has been the gateway to our nation's capital for over 100 years. And we are surrounded here by the combination of some of America's most significant modes of transportation: Amtrak, public buses, the metro, and of course, personal vehicles. Now, the transportation sector is the U.S. economy's largest contributor to greenhouse gases. And that relationship to the problem of climate change means that we in transportation can also be the biggest part of the solution. And the solution clearly includes zero-emission vehicles and charging stations like the ones you've seen today. So I can't think of a better way to mark this Earth Day than by discussing the future of electric vehicles in America. And I can't think of a better way to do it than in front of charging stations like these. Charging infrastructure and the businesses that deliver it are helping to open a new way to a new era in transportation. And we're thrilled to see where this road is going to take us. The President has said that when he thinks about climate, he thinks jobs, and vice versa. And at the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, we recognize that electric vehicles and the charging networks that fuel them are good for the planet and help create good-paying American jobs. And that's why I'm pleased to share some important news about the future of electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure that makes them possible. Today, the Federal Highway Administration is announcing our 5th round of new alternative fuel corridors. These are designations that represent progress toward building out a national network of EV charging and alternative fueling stations to support long-distance travel. To date, the administration has designated nearly 166,000 miles of our national highways as alternative fuel corridors, covering 49 states and the District of Columbia, and that includes 59,000 miles of EV corridors, again, designated as of now by the Federal Highway Administration. These routes, which connect communities large and small, signal the clear demand for cleaner, more affordable transportation across the country. And it's our responsibility to help meet that demand. That's why we are also issuing a report clarifying how our existing programs can be used to support new EV charging infrastructure. Already we have $41.9 billion in federal funding spread across 15 Federal Highway Administration programs that our state partners can tap into to build EV chargers. And while some of those programs get a lot of use, there are others that are less widely known. So we hope that the report we're releasing today will shed light on resources that are already available as we work toward the administration's goal of installing 500,000 new EV chargers nationwide by the end of the decade. At the same time, if we want to meet this historic goal, our existing resources won't be enough. That's where the American Jobs Plan comes in. Today, the U.S. market share in electric vehicles It's going to create good-paying jobs for American workers, making batteries and vehicles, and building and installing new EV charging stations. It's going to provide consumers with new incentives to buy American-made EVs, all while ensuring those vehicles are affordable for the average family. It will electrify the federal fleet and at least 20% of our yellow school buses, along with replacing 50,000 diesel transit vehicles. And it will establish grant programs for state governments and the private sector to build a new national network of 500,000 EV chargers by 2030. The American Jobs Plan is a win-win for workers and for the environment. And with your help, we're going to seize this once-in-a-generation opportunity to spark an electric vehicle revolution and build a new future for American transportation. And to tell you exactly how we're going to make that happen, I have the pleasure now of turning it over to White House National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and happy Earth Day, everybody. I want to just thank Secretary Buttigieg for all of his tremendous work, for his leadership. I'm excited to be sharing Earth Day with him, as well as with my good friend Cathy Zoi, who has been in the energy efficiency, renewable energy, and clean energy world for as long as I've known her. And look, she still is in that world, so I'm excited about it. You know, as the Secretary mentioned, Union Station is a hub for all kinds of transportation, and that includes the transportation of the future. I'm excited to see these new EV chargers here at the station and to get a chance to talk about how we're building up our charging infrastructure for the future right here in the United States while we're creating millions of jobs. Look, the fact is, creating jobs and addressing climate change are not contrary ideas. They actually go together hand in hand. And when I stood next to President Biden while he signed executive orders to make sure that we tackled the climate crisis at home and abroad, he declared very loudly and very convincingly and clearly that in his White House, climate change day was jobs day, right? Every time we think about climate, we think about growing jobs right here in the United States of America, and not just any jobs, but good-paying union jobs. And in some way, for me and my team, every day since January 20th has been Climate Day, Earth Day, Jobs Day, and every week has been Infrastructure Week and Innovation Week. It's been very busy. We have an enormous opportunity to not only address the threats of climate change, but to use it as a chance to create those millions of good-paying union jobs that are going to fuel our economic recovery, that are going to rebuild the middle class in the United States and build our country back better, stronger, more sustainable, healthier, fairer, and more equitable. One of the key pieces of President Biden's American Jobs Plan is supercharging, pun intended, America's ability to get more EVs on the road and make them affordable for families and install charging stations in convenient places like the ones that you are seeing today. We're proposing a $15 billion investment that will help build up a national network of 500,000 charging stations across America's highways and roads and at transit centers like Union Station. This is just one of the key investments in American Jobs Plan, but it is a critical one because transportation is one of the backbones of our economy. Not just because of cars, but because of the parts that we can make that go into those cars, the manufacturing supply chain we can recapture to make the EVs and the charging infrastructure stations of the future right here in America to install right here in America. For many families, cars are essential, getting to work, driving the kids to soccer games, going on road trips, and that's why reducing emissions from these vehicles is absolutely essential if we actually expect to address the challenge of climate change. And in this country, and as you can see, with Secretary Kerry's leadership summit, the world is expecting that we will address climate change. And we're going to do it in ways that ensure U.S. competitiveness in new industries and making electric vehicles and charging affordable and accessible to everyone. And look, these autos are coming. We know it. It is the future. I'm not talking about it. The auto manufacturers started it. They came to us and said electric vehicles are a future. And we know that that is the case, and we have to win back the future for the United States of America. As recently as 2010, there were basically no plug-in models available. But there are now 100,000 public chargers, and it's something, but it's not nearly enough. The EV future is growing, folks. It is growing quickly. This means we have to build up our infrastructure very fast. And we have to work with the utilities, automakers, state and local governments to make the plans and the investments that we need to build and operate chargers and EVs all across America so that drivers can know they're going to get where they need to go and get back home again. The federal government is also leading on EVs. We want to make sure that our actions align with our ambitions. That's why we're so excited to be here today and announce early progress in using the power of the federal procurement process to unlock the potential of electrifying and cleaning U.S. fleets. The U.S. government owns one of the largest vehicle fleets in the world, so President Biden did the smart thing. He said, hey, federal agencies, why don't we move your fleets to clean and zero-emission vehicles as quickly as we possibly can? It means we're showing what our values are in this country, and it's showing how smart we are about capturing and winning that future. And we are going to ensure that we retain union jobs as an integral part of building, running, and maintaining these fleets for the United States of America. One of our key partners in this endeavor is the General Services Administration, which both procures and manages the federal fleet and deploys the charging infrastructure that we need. I want to thank GSA Acting Administrator Cathy Zoi, right there. Thanks, Cathy, for being here with us today, and for all of her team for all of their tremendous leadership. This is just the start, folks. And these are just the initial steps that we are going to take to get the federal fleet on a path to net zero. That's what the president expects. That's what we are all going to deliver. So let me close by reiterating what brings me to this work, and it's Joe Biden's unwavering focus on people. Even when we talk about climate change, it is not about the planet, it's about people. It's about our future, our kids. It's an unwavering focus on the air that we breathe and our public health, the strength of how we can build our communities and make sure we are grabbing environmental justice as we move forward. It's what we value, it's what we care about, and we have to deliver it. It's about the dignity that comes with good work and the jobs that we can create, the millions of jobs to put everybody back to work. It's the way we keep working together to find renewed hope as well as opportunity. You know, after all, this day is all about investing in America and winning the future for our kids. That's why we're here, Earth Day, Jobs Day, every day. Thanks for being here. And now Secretary Buttigieg and I will take a few questions from the press, if you happen to have any. Secretary.
Gina, Dave Shepardson from Reuters. Hey, good. Thank you. The plan that you've laid out.
Something about cars, I take it?
The plan calls for $100 billion in consumer rebates to help spur EV purchases. Can you tell us, are you going to increase the $7,500 rebate, expand it, or somehow rejig it?
Well, that's the kind of analysis that we're doing now, Mr. Secretary, unless he has new news. You know, we just want to make sure that we're putting money on the table and working with Congress to help us deliver it, to make sure that everybody has access to these vehicles. If they are the future, we shouldn't expect people to be left behind. And that's part of the reason why we're working so hard to make sure that it's not just consumer rebates, but we're working with the industry itself, making sure that they're hiring union workers, paying them a good salary, keeping them safe at the workplace. You know, this is about, I think, Joe Biden's values. It's about him recognizing that work is important and our workers have to be put in a safe and profitable environment if we ever expect to have the kind of productivity to capture these types of markets.
There's some studies that suggest you need at least 50% of U.S. sales by 2030 to be EVs to meet these climate goals. Do you agree with that stat? And does the president, will he commit to ending gasoline-powered vehicle sales by a date certain, like 2035?
I know that a lot of the manufacturers are talking about delivering 100% EVs by 2035. We're not making any promises and we're not making any demands right now because this is about basically using the market to generate the kind of reductions we need. And no, we have not landed on a particular number that we need in terms of reduction from in the entire sector or through the use of and production of EVs. We have a whole lot of ways to get to 50 to 52, which for those who may not be as smart as Dave might not know, that is what we just announced as our nationally determined contribution, is to get to 50 to 52% reduction from a baseline of 2005 by 2030, so that we could actually once again lead the world in this effort to address our climate crisis.
Mr. Secretary?
Yeah.
Quick question about Republicans are floating this idea that EV drivers should have to pay some sort of fee because they're not paying gas taxes, because they're not using gasoline. What is your position on that, and what do you think of that idea being floated?
Yeah, again, the American Jobs Plan comes with its own pay for. So we're interested in hearing other ideas, but it was important to the president that this be structured in a way that did not add to the national debt, which is why it's fully paid for with the corporate tax reforms, and by year 16, it's actually serving to reduce the debt. Remember, the president made a promise that he takes very seriously, that we're not going to put forward any plan that involves increasing the tax burden on Americans making less than $400,000 a year. So that's the starting point, and that would be a consideration for any kind of revenue model that we see.
Just a follow-up on that for either of you. What do you say to taxpayers who say, I don't think I should have to pay for the charging infrastructure of the country? What is the expectation of the auto industry that would be benefiting from that infrastructure?
Well, Director McCarthy might have some thoughts as well. What I would say is that there has to be a both and. It's not enough to simply allow things to unfold at their own pace. If we do that, America might be outpaced by countries that are not afraid to take proactive policy steps to build out that EV market. I would liken it to the aviation sector, where, of course, we have a flourishing private sector of private companies. But if it were not for choices that were made in the New Deal era, for example, to use public dollars to expand the network of airports where they might not have been built otherwise, we would not have the robust aviation sector we have today. So it's not a question of all EV or even most EV charging infrastructure being developed, or certainly not being owned and operated by government, but it is a question of making sure we have enough of a policy push to make sure those market-making steps happen. That's what it'll take to place America and keep America number one in EVs.
I should have identified myself. Sorry, Ben Tracy from CBS. We've talked on Zoom. What is the expectation of the auto industry to chip in for some of this infrastructure?
We'll have to wait and see, but clearly I'm totally with Secretary Buttigieg in this, is that it was never really intended to be a government run and a government funded for everything. This is all about doing what government does. Is you say the direction that you think the world is going to head, you begin to invest in it, you develop partnerships with the private sector, you figure out how to move it forward, and that's what's going to happen here. So I think as soon as people who are ambitious want to open up a new company or want to get a job with a thriving one, gets the idea that we're actually going to be serious about climate, we're going to shift to EVs, they're going to see that for too many years we've been outsourcing these types of new technologies to other countries to manufacture and manage. It is time for those people to recognize that America is open for this business. And we want that business here, and we want those workers, and especially with access to unions right here. Everybody calls me a different title. This is really interesting. I like that.
I wasn't sure what
I don't know what my title is either, so it's okay.
Dino Grandoni, Washington Post.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we've seen today South Africa, Japan come out with their own ratcheted up nationally determined commitments, but not a lot of other countries. Were you expecting more countries to come out with their commitments under the Paris Climate Accord today?
I think the expectation today was that the United States would put a strong nationally determined contribution on the table so that we would have an ability to gather people together again and say the United States is back. That's what we did. But it is a road to Glasgow that we're looking to actually have the kind of time and concerted conversations that will hopefully lead to a really strong opportunity when we get to Glasgow in November. So we're not at all disappointed. We got the leaders to come together, even if it was on Zoom. We actually had a lot of countries that stepped up to the plate. We expect a lot more, but we have been here just short of 100 days. So I think we're pretty much on track to putting our stake in the ground and saying that in joining back with other countries and saying that there's no more time to waste. This coming decade is where we make or break it on climate in terms of how committed we are if we actually want to stay at levels that science demands.
And one follow-up there. A few different independent analysts have taken a look at the commitment that the U.S. is making, 50 to 52%, and they're saying that isn't going to be good enough to reach that 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. What do you say to that?
Well, the president's goal has stated a number of goals, and let me be very clear. He stated a goal that we want to get clean electricity by 2035. So part of this will be pushing on the utility sector so that we can make sure that we achieve that. And we don't think it's going to be a hard push because they've been marching towards renewable energy as the least cost electricity producing. And so we should be heading in the right direction. We want to get there. He's also identified net zero by 2050 as a commitment that he is going to make. It's a goal he has set. And so there is no suggestion that I would like to make to you that says we're going to achieve all of that in 2030. And I'm also going to say that I don't think we fell short of expectations to be aggressive. The number we put on the table was doable, but it is ambitious. And we can't be anything less than that. We can't be anything less than that if we actually want to address climate change. And so I'm pretty comfortable with the number. I know there's lots of ways that we can get to it. I also know that when countries like the United States that are very serious set a goal, we tend to go well beyond it because the private sector hears it, they think about how do I make money on it, and they run. I love that. It's called capitalism at its finest.
Time for one more question.
Can I ask one on, speaking of electric vehicles, it's a little off the subject, but as you know, there have been a series of autopilot crashes, and there's a crash in Texas that left 2 people dead, which police think there was no one in the driver's seat. Can you talk about what the agency is doing to look into those crashes?
Yeah, so safety is our number one priority as a department. So as you might expect, we're following this very closely. Matter of fact, NHTSA has a team doing an investigation of this, as well as being in touch with law enforcement and the automaker. Still gathering facts and information. But I do think this is an important time to stress that a lot of automated driver assistance systems continue to depend on the expectation of an attentive driver behind the wheel. But we'll continue to see what's going on in this case, and then looking forward, we'll have safety as the fundamental North Star in all of our policy design. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Mr. Secretary, you're awesome.
Everybody's got a taste of what is to come. Feels good. Thank you.
So let us know how we can help.
Likewise.
Across the country. Yeah.
The money's great. 500,000 is never
Get it.
Well, we don't need to do it all now. We don't need to do it all now.
No,
We don't we can stage this as we did the Recovery Act stuff. There's so much creativity we can bring to this thing, so.
That's why I think that your answer is exactly.
Kickstart.
This is a market transformation thing. Like we did this with Sunshine, right? We said we're going to do some things to get solar to be $1 a watt, and we did it. Like and now the market's working. So if you guys can help build a bridge, then we got it. We don't have PVs on the road. We don't have PVs right now. Use the
We will have. Seriously. The first thing that came out of it was
It is the very rare and foolish car company now that's no electrified. And that wasn't true 3 years ago.
That's right.
That was not true 3
That's
years
the
ago.
most exciting development in many ways of years. The legacy. This isn't just a startup thing, but
No.
Detroit's all
But
over.